So following up on the series of things that they say that they know I've been sensitised to, or things that they do, or things that they wear on their knees. Oh, surprise, surprise, they're touching my phone screen. Surprise, surprise. So one of the things that they do quite often is they'll throw litter on the ground in front of me because they had video of me a couple of times admonishing people for doing this. One time was in Glasgow city centre. I was only in my early 20s, probably about 23, 24. And I'd finished work in Glasgow. It's the only time I've really had an office job, and it never lasted very long. So I'd finished work in the city centre, and I was leaving, and as I was walking to get the train back to my house, back home, an older woman in her 50s, I would say, walked out of an office building in front of me, took a cigarette out of her packet, crumbled her packet up and then threw it onto the ground in front of where I was walking towards her. So I stopped and I said, "There's a bin right there," and pointed to the bin that was right next to her. And she told me to fuck off and mind my own fucking business. But they had this on video, you know. She obviously got pissed off that how dare I say anything to her. Another time was in Edinburgh, where I was driving, I was collecting from a food manufacturer, and I'd picked up food in the lorry and I was taking it back to the depot in Bells Hill at the time, or I think I was taking it directly to the supermarket, main delivery point, the supermarket depot. And I was sitting at traffic lights and there was a car in front of me with a guy in it, and he put his window down and threw out all his rubbish, so like a sandwich wrapper plus a bottle of, an empty bottle of juice right in front of me. So I climbed down for the lorry, I picked his rubbish up off the road, and then I threw it back in his open window. And he asked me what the fuck I thought I was doing, and then proceeded to throw it back out again. And again, they had CCTV from the lorry. This was when I worked for a company called Long Lane Deliveries. Again, they never told me that they were filming me within the vehicles. So they had these two examples, so they'll do this quite a lot, They'll do this quite a lot. They'll have people, let me just clear this so you can see, because obviously they've got their little morons driving past and they don't want me to collect any cars by fucking with my phone. So they'll do this quite a lot. They'll have people walk past me, and right in front of me they'll drop litter. So they had some stupid, ugly looking bitch this morning do it. She walked out of Greg's in front of me and threw her litter right on the ground, right when she knew I was coming, and I said something like, "Oh yeah, of course you're going to do that, throwing litter in front," and she tried to start an argument with me, I just kind of laughed at her and walked off, and she shouted after me that I should fuck off back to Scotland, which is a favourite theme of theirs, which is what they like to shout at me, because when I was staying in a homeless, like an emergency housing place a couple of years ago, and I'd been homeless for a while, and I was doing all right because I was going to the local sports centre and getting showers and going swimming and washing my clothes in there, and I was living in a tent, and I wasn't drinking because I knew how vulnerable I was already, and I didn't want to add to that by being drunk and being even more vulnerable and being at the mercy of these bastards. So I went to the council, I went to the Citizens Advice Bureau and asked about kind of housing. I was told that under no circumstances would I be housed because I had no local connections and I hadn't worked or lived in the area for 2 years. I hadn't lived in the area and paid council tax for 2 years, and I had no local options, so they were never going to house me. And then I'd been sleeping in a tent, like homeless, for about, 6 to 8 weeks, I would say, in this place, in this town. And then one day I was out walking, like I say, I was taking quite good care of myself. I was going to the sports centre every day. I got a membership, with my benefit money. I wasn't drinking. I'd started around that time walking quite a lot. So obviously my health was improving, my self-esteem was improving through not drinking, and I wasn't putting myself at risk. I was just keeping to myself, spending time in the library, etc., when I wasn't you know, when I wasn't walking, using the computer. So one day after about 6 to 8 weeks, I was out walking, and the guy from the Citizens Advice Bureau, who'd been there when the council had told me that there was no help for me, walked past me and he says, oh, you know, the council want to speak to you, or, you know, this just isn't good enough that they're not doing anything for you. And then that same day, lo and behold, the council decided that they had emergency accommodation for me. Now, bear in mind, I hadn't been questioning any of this. I hadn't been questioning wanting them to put me up. I was okay doing my thing, you know, just kind of, like I say, walking, using the library, going swimming every day, you know, keeping myself clean, keeping myself to myself, and best of all, not drinking. This obviously didn't sit well with them, you know, because they're not able to gaslight you or mess with you when you're not using your substance of choice. So they put me up in this homeless accommodation, and then obviously I felt a bit less vulnerable, so I turned back to alcohol. One day, one of the women that lived there, well, there was two women and a guy. There was a guy that lived kind of opposite my room in this place. It's an absolute shithole. And he got friendly with these two women. And then one day I'd had a skinful, I'd been drinking, and one of these bitch women came and started banging on my window. So I went outside and I said to her, I was perfectly nice, you know, but I'd had a few to drink. And they knew this, so they were trying to wind me up, you know. They use it when you're at your most kind of ability to get angry, you know. Drink obviously changes your personality. So I went up to her and I said, don't bang on my window. So then she proceeded, two women and this guy, proceeded to stand. I put my blinds down so they couldn't see into my room, but they proceeded to stand outside my window for the next half an hour, screaming and shouting about how I should fuck off back to Scotland, how I was a Scot cunt, etc, etc. I was a fucking mess, yada yada, you know, going on and on and on, until eventually I saw red, and I picked up a pair of scissors and I went out, and as soon as she saw me, she smirked at me, she smiled at me, you know, the main protagonist, the one who didn't give her name to the police, the one who did phone the police. Her name is Lisa Traynor, but the one who didn't want to get involved with the police because she's a gangstalker, you know, she's a gangstalking piece of shit, they all are, and they were just waiting for me to snap because they knew I was drinking. So yeah, I went out with a pair of scissors, and as soon as she saw me, she smirked at me, and then she went running inside. And then the other one started screaming. I only went out because there was three of them, and there was me, and they were pounding on my window repeatedly and screaming abuse at me, you know, for about half an hour, over half an hour actually. And I wanted them to shut the fuck up, and I didn't want to go out with nothing, just being on my own. It was a stupid thing to do, but I'd had a drink. So she phoned the police, said that I'd threatened them with scissors. I mean, I was holding scissors. I hadn't threatened them with scissors. Obviously the police came and arrested me, you know, because it was a big set-up and the police were involved. The police had probably put them up to it. Someone was telling them about my declining sobriety within that room, you know. And I can only assume it was the police / NHS, you know, who are massively involved in my stalking and my targeting. So anyway, fast forward, last year when I was at my brother's house, and you know, it was round about the time where he started giving me the silent treatment, and he said, but he did say, you know, I'm worried about you, you know. He started saying that he was worried that I would think that he was using directed conversation, that I would think he was saying things and he didn't know whether he was saying something that maybe might be significant to me. I mean, he knew exactly what he was fucking doing. He was a big player in this. He's a definite member of this network, you know. There's a reason why when he was living in a £500,000 house with his 20-year-old lady friend in Yorkshire, that he came up to Scotland and spent a lot of time in a cannabis grow house, you know, spent several months there, and I believe it was him paying his penance to this gang because they had some juicy information on him, and instead of standing up for them, what he did was he threw me under the bus, and he decided to stay in a grow house for a few months for them and look after it, you know, risking getting caught by the police. because it was better than becoming a targeted individual. That's what I believe happened. But I believe he sold me out to them, you know. I've spoke before about the SIM card that he gave to my cousins at my nan's funeral. And all the information regarding that, plus the fact that, you know, he'd stole from me for years, renting out my parents' house, not giving me money. You know, he's very money obsessed. Very selfish, self-centred, very jealous, very bitter. Anyway, so he says to me, you know, I'm worried that, you know, I could say something that you would think meant I was involved. And he goes, you know, what if someone in the street says something to you and you go out and maybe threaten them, you know, with a pair of scissors? Very specific account that he had. And I laughed, you know, because I knew by then what it was that he was doing and that he was playing a part in it. And I laughed and I said, that's very specific, isn't it? Threatened to stab them with a pair of scissors. I said, that's very specific. And he scoffed at me, went, oh, you know, fuck's sake, you know, as though I'm mental, as though I'm imagining all these things. So, yeah. One of the guys in the house recently as well, he made sure to use the reference of me fucking off back to Scotland. I dared to want to put my washing into the washing machine, and his washing was in there. It was surprising actually for this guy who has recently started working gangstalking. He goes out and does gangstalking from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. 2 or 3 times a week. But at this point, he wasn't working. But funnily enough, I wanted to put my washing in. His clothes were in there, so I took the clothes that were in the washing machine out and put them on top of it, and put my stuff in. And funnily enough, he had all clothes that would be worn by someone that was, you know, painting for a living or working as a joiner for a living, you know, clothes that were all marked with company names. Very interesting for someone who doesn't work, isn't it? Almost like he could be walking around the streets and people would see him with company signs on his clothes, you know, company insignia on his workwear, and think that he actually had a job. It's interesting. But anyway, I came back from where I was. My washing was done. He came flying out his room, you know, and said, was it you that took my washing out? And I said, yeah. And he goes, don't ever touch my fucking stuff, don't ever touch my things. How dare you, you know? And I just laughed at him. There's a fat bastard on the moped that always stalks me regardless of where I go. He said, don't you dare touch my things. And I just laughed as I was walking to my room, you know, and he shouted after me, you should fuck off back to Scotland. You know, that's how angry this guy got for me daring to take his washing out and place it neatly on top of the washing machine. And then I heard him say to the one in another room, you know, the main protagonist in the house, the one who the police spent 2 hours in her room shortly after I moved in, obviously indoctrinating her into what kind of language to use, how to look up my details on whatever app they use. And he went up to her later and he went, you know, I had to have a go at her earlier because she took my washing out, you know, as if he was reporting back to the teacher type thing. Had to have a go at her. You didn't have a go at me, you fucking scummy pedo noncy looking cunt. Anyway, so that's what they use. They use litter a lot. They'll throw litter in front of me to try and make me kick off and tell them off, so then they can start an argument with me and hope that I'll take it further. And they often use the phrase, fuck off back to Scotland, thinking it'll annoy me. Anyway, that's my out of breath rant for today. Take care. God bless. Lots of love.